Hi, my name is Sky Boggs, and I'm a producer here at StockCharts TV. In the United States, April 22nd is Earth Day, a time which marks the anniversary of the birth of the modern environmental movement. Now, this time of year has got me thinking about SRIs, or socially responsible investing, also known as sustainable, green, or ethical investing. This topic of SRIs isn't something that I'm that familiar with. That's why I wanted to chat with Mish of Market Gauge, and of course of Mish's Market Minute here on StockCharts TV. In her book, Plant Your Money Tree, A Guide to Growing Your Wealth, she has a section on socially responsible investing, SRIs. So of course I knew she'd be able to educate me on what SRIs are, their history, and why they are something I should care about. Hi, Mish. So can you give me a little background on what SRIs are and where they came from?
Hi, Sky. Well, it's such a fascinating area because SRI stands for socially responsible investing. But people think it's a new notion, and actually it dates back to 1758 when the Quakers were boycotting companies that were promoting slavery. The Quakers were classically anti-slavery. It then evolved, if we just kind of fast forward, into the 60s. And of course, we know the 60s and the 70s generation was all about socially responsible type of environment. And so there was a big movement against the Vietnamese War. There was a big movement in favor of women's rights. And Martin Luther King, of course, was at the helm of civil rights. And so all of those areas, and particularly Martin Luther King, were promoting buying companies that supported in the right side of the moral compass and boycotting the companies that were not. So that's really the evolvement of it. The next place it evolved to, it still exists, obviously, SRI, and green energy is a big part of that now. But I think probably the more controversial part of the whole SRI movement, and what you hear a lot of pundits talk about, is the ESG part of SRI. And ESG is the environment, corporate governance, which basically means buying companies that are hiring, particularly heads of boards or CEOs, either women or minority groups. And that's a little bit more interesting in that you're now really going into almost an affirmative action support on one level, but not necessarily really worrying about the bottom line of what that company even does.
So what kind of SRIs, ESGs, ETFs are there today?
I like to look at the ETFs because the ETFs really have a basket of companies that might be involved with some kind of an SRI. And then there are some of the classic companies as well, like Microsoft and Tesla, that are definitely all about socially responsible investing. And so essentially, you can look at a couple of areas. You can look at bonds. There are bonds that actually follow the path of the SRI companies and ETFs. And those bonds are traded as ETFs. So one is FLTR, it's a Vanguard bond. One is FLRN, and the other is FLOT. And then if we also move into other areas, there's SUSA, so that's really more in terms of the environmental, DSI, kind of the same thing, and TAN, which is something that's become way more popular, way more liquid, but that's really tied to green energy, and PHO, PHO, which is tied to water conservation. And so those are kind of the main areas that I like to follow and I like to look at.
Okay, great. I love this, how there are so many ways that we can invest in socially responsible ways. But can we make money with SRIs?
Well, it's always, just like you hear people say, buy the companies that you know, could be very positive in a bullish environment, but very negative when the market is going down. And that's exactly what we've been seeing this year, is that some of these big cap stock companies that we all know and have heard about for years are proving not to be infallible to a big market sell-off or higher interest rates or inflation. And the same rule is going to apply to these SRI or ESG companies. They are not infallible to a market turn down. In fact, in some ways, especially ESGs, they may be even more vulnerable if they don't have great balance sheets, regardless of who's at the helm. And also, they're not invulnerable to inflation. So you really have to say, I can make money in these companies if I understand the technical setup, if I look at the overall macro, and if I also really understand risk versus reward. Now, with all that said, let's take a look at TAN in particular, because TAN was trying to go up as oil has been going up. So when I talk about the macro, maybe the one area that might have more ability to go higher in a very high inflationary market that is driven by energy and oil, it would be TAN, which has a lot of solar stocks, because eventually we know that people are buying more electric cars, that people are looking for solar panels for wind energy, and that we have a government now that is actually providing support for infrastructure to support that. So that would be, the TAN would be the exception. But nonetheless, if you look at TAN, it's in better shape than a lot of the other companies I just told you about, but still can be vulnerable in an overall liquidity type of situation in the market.
Sounds about right. So it sounds like SRIs are not necessarily any different than any of the other stock that you might be interested in trading or getting involved with. So that being said, for someone who wants to start investing and is very interested in SRIs in particular, or ESGs, what's the biggest piece of advice you'd give to people who want to get started in this field?
Well, again, you really want to know what's happening in the overall market. If you're in a situation like we find ourselves now, where inflation numbers keep getting higher, and the Federal Reserve is getting more hawkish, and free money in terms of interest rates being at zero is now a thing of the past, you have to put that into the equation. So it's always good to kind of know where you're going. Now, if you want to get more specific, because I mentioned TAN, another one, by the way, is water is actually doing better. PHO is doing better than some of these others as well. If you want to get involved, my book really explains this very clearly. You should really understand what phase the particular instrument is. And it's very easy if you just look at the moving averages, and you don't need 50 million indicators on your chart. You don't need MACDs and RSI and volume. You could look at that if that's something that really interests you. I just simply like to look at the 50-day and the 200-day moving averages. It's what most institutions use, and then where the price is relative to that. So if we take a look at TAN, for example, it's above the 50-day moving average. So what does that tell you? The next thing you need to understand as a trader who wants to get involved is where your risk is. So if you're buying something as it's clearing that 50-day moving average, going, let's say, from a bearish scenario to a more of a recovery or recuperation scenario, guess what? If it breaks down under the 50, you're wrong, you get out. If it continues to go up, you stay with the trade, and at some point start to take some profits and raise stops. And that's really sounds very, very basic, and it is. But I would say that probably if you've never traded before, find one of the areas in the SRI space that you like. Maybe it's Tesla, and Tesla is a whole other animal. But if you're a little scared of Tesla at these high prices, which certainly would be understandable, I would look at TAN, or I would look at PHO, and I would become a student of those price movements and those two moving averages and how that all lines up relative. Is it outperforming the overall market? Will it be dragged down with the overall market? Will eventually become a counter trend and go up first if the whole market goes down?
So it seems what Mish is saying here is that it's great to focus on investments that you care about and feel good about, but you still have to have a trader mentality. If you'd like to learn more about social responsible investing and other information about finances and trading, check out Mish's book, Plant Your Money Tree, A Guide to Growing Your Wealth, in the StockCharts bookstore. Happy Earth Day, and we'll see you next time.
Hey guys, Dave Keller here with StockCharts.com. Thanks so much for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, and we hope you did, Hit the like button right below. Also, we have so much new content every day. Consider subscribing to the channel. Just hit the subscribe button in the video or right below. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Have a fantastic day.